At a funeral in Albania, the Mafia is laying to rest Marco, the son of their boss Murad. He recalls how his son was taken from him by an American killer and vows revenge on the man, planning to bring him to their country and spill his blood on their soil. We then catch up with Bryan Mills, former CIA Black Ops, as he pulls up to his ex-wife Lenore's house to take his daughter for driving lessons. After giving him the runaround, Lenore finally confesses that their daughter Kim has a boyfriend, almost giving Bryan a heart attack as he had no idea she was dating. Bryan is worried as he should be, but Lenore reassures him Kim is okay. As for her, Lenore is now separated from her former husband and is a bit lonely. Before Bryan leaves, Lenore asks him not to track Kim down, which he says he won't. Meanwhile, Kim is at first base with her boyfriend Jamie, who is looking to hit a home run, but Kim's not ready for the big leagues. Just then Bryan turns up at the door. He didn't pinky promise, so it's fine. He meets Jamie, and if looks could kill he would be dead. Kim is shocked to see Bryan there, and feeling embarrassed she hurries into the car. They go for their drive and Kim is upset at him, wondering how he found her. She learns he installed a tracker in her phone, which is understandable since she gets kidnapped like every movie. Though she is mad, Kim understands that her father is just trying to protect her, but she wants time and space to feel normal. She asks him to not run a background check on Jamie and he says he won't, but since he did not pinky promise, it's fine. So he calls his friend Sam and asks him to run a background check. We then meet corrupt French officer Pitrel as he enters his building. He is ambushed by Murad's man Suko, who ties him up and beats him, demanding to know where Bryan Mills is. They reveal that Pitrel's business card was found at the scene of Marco's death, but Pitrel swears that he does not know where Mills is, so Suko uses a scissors to stab him in the leg. The next day Bryan turns up at Lenore's house where he finds her in tears. She explains that they had planned a family trip with her husband to try and patch things up, but he cancelled everything. Feeling sorry for her, Bryan invites her to join him on his 3-day security job in Istanbul if she wishes. Bryan makes it to Istanbul and is hanging out with friends as they mock the relationship he and his ex-wife has, saying that he probably can still get the cheeks. At that moment, we see Marco's man bribing an official in Turkey, who in turn reveals Bryan's location in Istanbul. Kim and Lenore turn up to surprise Bryan in Istanbul and he brings them to his hotel room. Later that night, Kim wants to go out but Lenore plans to get some rest, so Bryan and Kim head out into the city. After hitting a club, Bryan and Kim take a ferry ride together. He asks her about Jamie and if she is in love, but Kim is not sure, as she doesn't feel the way her mom explained feeling when she met Bryan. The next morning, Murad and a convoy of cars arrive in Istanbul where he meets up with Suko, who reveals that everything is ready. He arrives at a safe house and contacts his man, who has an eye on Bryan as he is leaving the hotel. Bryan meets up with Lenore and Kim in the lobby to head out, but Kim decides to stay behind and relax at the pool. As Bryan and Lenore leave, another Mafia member reports that Kim is staying behind and Murad tells him that he wants all three of them. Lenore and Bryan are in a private cab, talking about their family and what could have been. Bryan then notices a car trailing them and has his driver turn into a busy street to slow them down. He gives Lenore instructions on what to do and where to go, telling her to get back to the hotel and get to Kim. Lenore gets out and Bryan commandeers the car, alerting the men that he is onto them. Murad gives his men the go-ahead and they begin to chase Bryan through the streets while he is trying to call Kim, who is busy in the pool. They corner Bryan and begin shooting at him, causing his car to crash, but the men soon realize that Bryan is gone. Bryan is on foot making a run for it, but the men spot him and give chase. He is cornered by 2 men but he manages to take them out. 2 more show up, but Bryan manages to beat them down easily. Suddenly Suko turns up with a gun held to Lenore's head, forcing him to stand down. Bryan calls Kim, who finally picks up. He tells her what is about to happen and that men are coming for her, giving her instructions on where to hide. He drops his gun and the men beat him down viciously before taking them both away. With a hood over his head, Bryan begins to count the seconds, noting every turn and what he hears and smells. Meanwhile, Murad's men burst into Kim's room to find it empty. She runs to her father's room to hide, but the door is locked, forcing her to climb along the outside ledge. The men come to his room and are so persistent on catching her that they also climb on the ledge to get to her. Kim manages to hide in the closet as the men enter the room and search for her, and almost find her until they are forced to fire at security guards, raising an alarm and fleeing. Bryan and Lenore are brought to an abandoned warehouse where he is tied up. Seeing that he is alone, he removes a mini cell phone from his socks and manages to grab it and call Sam, but only gets voicemail. He calls Kim, who is still in the closet. He tells her to go to the US Embassy, but Kim refuses to leave them there and asks him to tell her what to do to help. Bryan reluctantly tells her to take a case out of the closet and open it to remove a map. He instructs her on how to narrow down his location, and when that does not work, he tells her to take a grenade and throw it at a safe location. Kim throws the grenade and it explodes, and Bryan counts the time it takes him to hear the explosion. Based on this and the direction of the wind, he narrows down his location and tells her to take a gun and 2 more grenades and head to a closer spot. It's complicated, watch the movie. He hears guys entering his cell and has to end the call before he can say more. Suko enters and begins to beat Bryan up before he comes face to face with Murad. He begins to show Bryan pictures of all the men he killed and finally one of Marco, wanting his revenge. Bryan reminds him that Marco kidnapped his daughter, but Murad does not care. He then has his men bring in Lenore, and put a small cut on her neck. They tie her upside down, wanting Bryan to watch the blood go to her head, then planning to kidnap Kim and sell her off. Murad and his men leave, and Bryan begins to try breaking out to save Lenore. He finally breaks his strap ties and rushes to her. Meanwhile, Kim has taken a cab to one of the locations on the map close to where Bryan is. She gets through to him and he tells her to set off another grenade, which he hears. He tells her to continue east. Meanwhile, he manages to break one of the heating pipes, telling her to look for the steam which she sees from the roofs. She gets to the chimney and drops the gun down, before being chased by Murad's men. Bryan is able to get the gun just in time as guards comes to check, and he kills both men. He leaves Lenore and heads upstairs, where he kills all the men in the room. He rushes up to the rooftops where he sees Kim being chased by the men. She manages to stay ahead until she is cornered by one man, but Bryan kills him before he can hurt Kim. They steal a cab and head back to the gang's place, where he tells her to wait 5 minutes, then head to the US Embassy with or without them. Bryan heads inside to get Lenore, but she is gone. The men have found her and are dragging her away. Outside, Kim sees the cops pull up and head inside. Bryan goes after Lenore, but he is too late and he sees her dragged into a van. He heads back to Kim, where he has to shoot a cop who was talking with Murad, and they take off. Cops begin to give chase and Kim starts punking out. But since she can't shoot, she better drive. She gets a crash course in driving under pressure as the men open fire at the car, and Bryan urges her to go faster. She gathers her nerves and pulls off a sweet move, allowing Bryan to shoot one of the drivers. Then she hits the road again. They get to a train line with an incoming train, but Kim hits the gas and speeds past, causing their attackers to get blown to bits. They get to the embassy checkpoint, but Bryan urges her not to stop despite the gunfire and bursts through the gates, coming to a stop on the embassy grounds. He confesses to Kim that Lenore was taken, but since the men want him, he plans to go get her and put an end to all of this. Bryan traces his steps back to the location they were first kidnapped, checking for clues. Meanwhile, Lenore is being held in a room when Murad comes to her, telling her that Bryan is a coward for saving Kim over her, but Lenore only cares about Kim. For this, Murad decides to torture her and takes out his tools. Bryan begins to recall everything he heard on his way while being taken, and follows every sound and smell. He gets to one location where he spots a man that looks like a gangster. He enters the yard silently and kills the man, before heading inside the building and knocking out another. Now armed with an AK, Bryan hears other men and turns on the AK on one man, alerting Murad, who orders his men to take Lenore. Bryan begins to battle his way up, checking every room and dodging a barrage of gunfire just in time. 2 men try to corner him, but he kills them both. One man tries to stall him, but Bryan is able to beat the man down eventually. He rushes after Murad, who has taken Lenore through the streets and into another building. Bryan goes hunting for them inside until he sees Lenore lying unconscious on the floor. Suko then steps out and the two begin to fight, but Suko has skills. The two try to overpower each other with their moves and skills, but Bryan has those hands. Suko pulls a blade, cutting Bryan, then managing to knock him down. As he goes for the finishing blow, Bryan trips him and he hits his head and dies, very anticlimactic. He then takes his gun and goes to check on Lenore, who is still alive but very weak. He takes one of the men's phones and rings Murad's cell, hearing it ring in the distance. He finds Murad cowering in a corner like a wuss. Bryan gives him a chance to stop his quest for revenge, or he will be forced to kill his sons as well if they should come looking for him when they find their father dead. Marco agrees, and Bryan turns to leave and Murad tries to shoot him, but the gun is empty. Bryan, disappointed, turns and kills him. He goes back to Lenore, who asks about Kim and learns that she is safe. After this, those cheeks are guaranteed. A few weeks later, Bryan is watching as Kim does her driving test. She passes, and to celebrate, they go to have dinner at a restaurant. Jamie comes to join them and Bryan is laughing, but I'm sure he's dying inside. Remember to turn on notifications, so you can watch more movie recaps like this. Thanks for watching.